again with the mic. It's in the Valley Focus Live. Uncle Mike Hansen and I are at the Valley Diner, Route 9W Marlboro. Mr. Chuck Benfer, who is native to the area over here, is here as well.
Everybody's hot Uncle Mike is here.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, my God.
Speaking of hot, this Belgian waffle with the Nutella, fresh strawberries, fresh blueberries, yummy.
Yeah, I'll tell you something about these guys too. Frank and Teddy, when you come in here, if you have an idea for some sort of sandwich or concoction, they will go in the back and they'll make it up for you. I mean, they really are. They're incredibly cool food nerdies, right? And they just love experimenting with the menu, and their soups are fantastic. Everything's made right here. It really is a quite a place.
The corned beef hash that I had was outstanding, and we have Congressman John Faso on with us. Good morning, Congressman Faso.
Good morning, Tom. Nice to be with you.
Good, and Chuck Benfer is here, and Uncle Mike Hansen here.
Good morning, John.
We're having a good time at the Valley Diner on Route 9W down in Marlboro. It's this Belgian waffle I'm having is pretty good. It's too bad you're on the other end of the phone.
I know it. I haven't had breakfast yet, and you're making me jealous.
So, what is new in the world of Washington, Congressman John Faso?
Well, yesterday the Budget Committee referred the American Health Care legislation to the Rules Committee. I sit on the Budget Committee, and I voted in favor of that referral. And we're still working on some matters that will, I think, be subject to an amendment in the Rules Committee. And I'm hopeful that we can improve the legislation that will be that would be greatly beneficial to our state.
Hey, John, how frustrating is it for you to have, run for office and run on certain ideas and ideals, and then actually to get into Washington, D.C. And listen to the Speaker of the House say, well, this is how government works. We're going to put this through. We're going to push it through. It's going to go through some amendments, and then it's going to go to the Senate, and then the Senate's going to do this, and the Senate's going to do that, and then it's going to come back, and then we're going to – does it get at all frustrating
no,
as a new person there
doesn't.
to go?
I mean, that is actually how the process is supposed to work. When they enacted the ACA back in 2010, Nancy Pelosi, who was then Speaker, had famously said that they had to pass it before they could find out what was in it. And this legislation, while it is moving quickly, too quickly for some, I guess, but it is moving quickly, it is out in the open. And there are many facets of the healthcare system that need reform and change, but this is only part of it. And many of the changes that we need to lower premiums and make healthcare more affordable for people actually have to come from the Department of Health and Human Services in regulation. And then there is still further legislation that's going to be needed to be accomplished that can't be done through this budget process called reconciliation. Reconciliation essentially means that the legislation can be passed in the Senate with 51 votes and cannot be subject to amendment, or is not subject to filibuster, I mean. And the third piece of legislation is going to have to be negotiated and win Democratic support. So this is a very, very complex moving process, but I'm not frustrated at all by it. In fact, I'm working hard to try to make sure that we get some provisions in this legislation that are going to be beneficial to our state.
And do you think? I mean, one of the greatest criticisms of this plan, and I get the three phases, is that in reality, it's going to be difficult to get to that third phase. Do you see it that way, or do you think that this is just the Democrats and media just trying to throw cold water on it to start?
I think it is going to be difficult, but on the other hand, I think so much of this depends upon the political environment at that time. We're talking about something that would be later this summer or the fall, and it's very hard to predict what the political mood will be at that juncture. But there's no doubt in my mind that doing nothing was not an alternative, because in many parts of the country, the Affordable Care Act is simply collapsing. The insurance exchanges are being we're seeing insurance companies pull out of those exchanges, and people are left with very little competition or choice in terms of insurer. And the thing now, let's be fair. The Affordable Care Act has provided coverage, and good coverage in some instances for many people, and I've talked to them. But at the same time, those that are in employer-provided insurance, in employer groups, small businesses, those people are really getting the shaft by the insurance regulatory changes that have taken place. So people have told me about their business people, about having insurance for their company, and premiums have doubled, and people are paying deductibles that are $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, and that is simply not affordable.
And John, Tom Cypress here. This entire move to the Affordable Care Act. First of all, let's be right up front. This was, by its design, fraudulently designed. We know that from people like Jonathan Gruber. The representations that it was going to save families $2,500. If you like your doctor, you could keep it, et cetera, et cetera. Those were falsehoods. And government involvement in this, before the Affordable Care Act, I believe the surveys show that about 88% of the American public was satisfied or very satisfied with their health insurance access to health care. And yes, there were problems with the people with the chronic illness and pre-existing conditions. Exactly what? But is there any talk about just ultimately getting the government the heck out of the healthcare, health insurance industry, and then just setting up high-risk pools just to provide for those people who need the chronic care, because that's not insurance. That's a different funding mechanism. Any talk about that?
Tom, I think I'm practical about this. I will have to deal with the world as it is, not as we might hope it to
Understood.
be. And I think that the government involvement and the government regulation of insurance is something that is largely necessary, but what happened with the ACA is they over-federalized health insurance. It's historically been regulated at the state level where there's a lot of expertise, but there were some problems. And one of the things that is going to get funded in this program is a state grants that are going to fund those high-risk pools or reinsurance pools that will allow the people that have very high medical costs, allow the funding for those folks to come out of these high-risk pools and allow the insurers to lower premiums for everyone else. Now, I still have, candidly, some questions as to whether the funds that are being set aside are going to be sufficient to do that. And I think that everyone should understand that none of these changes are going to happen right away. This is going to be a 2 to 3 year process as these changes take place. And the reason for that is right now, insurers are planning their premiums and their networks for 2018. So this legislation, even if it passes the House soon, is probably going to take a couple of weeks in the U.S. Senate. So the fact is that it is not going to affect people's insurance or coverage right away, and that's for the beneficial aspects of it and what some people see as the negative aspects of it. The other piece of this is the Medicaid problem, and I've been working hard to try to make sure that the interests of New York are protected, while at the same time, as you may remember from the campaign, I had proposed that we finally amend federal law that eliminates the ability of a state like New York to impose Medicaid costs on the county property taxpayer. And that's something that is still in the mix right now as we speak.
Indeed it is. And are you able to hold through a break with us?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that and come back. And of course, President Trump released a budget proposal yesterday. If we can come back and talk about that on Hudson Valley Focus Live. Congressman John Faso representing New York's 19th Congressional District. Back in a minute on WKIP. Valley Focus Live. Here we are, Chuck Benfer and Mike Hansen at the Valley Diner, Route 9W in Marlborough, New York on the St. Patrick's Day. So, and we have Congressman John Faso on the telephone with us. And Congressman Faso, heading out to the break, I mentioned I wanted to come back and talk a little bit about the budget proposal that President Trump put out yesterday. Your quick thoughts about that, please.
Well, it is the president is looking at increasing defense spending. Much of this is geared towards readiness, military pay, training. I think that's quite important. The issue is going to be the means by which he plans to get the money to pay for it, and he's making fairly substantial cuts in domestic spending. I have not had a real chance to take a close look at it, but I've talked to some colleagues and very concerned about reductions in funding for the Superfund program, for instance, through EPA, through which we clean up hazardous and toxic waste sites. Other people are concerned about funding for rural development and agriculture programs and community development. So we're going to have our first briefing on this morning in the Budget Committee. It's just a briefing by staff. It's not a committee hearing, but the members will get together and we'll get this briefing, and I'll be better informed at that point. But I can tell you the early reaction from my colleagues that I've talked to has been pretty negative.
So when I watched the news yesterday, and of course there was a big headline on one of the websites, President Trump's budget wants to cut funding for Meals on Wheels. I mean, first of all, they go to that right there, very highly emotionally charged issue. And when I went and researched this, there's a proposed 13% cut to HUD, and I believe that the Meals on Wheels is a subset of HUD program. And less than 3% of the Meals on Wheels funding actually comes from the federal government. Most of it's supported at the state and local level. So again, they highly charged, and then talking about the fact that children will not be able to watch Sesame Street. None of that is true.
Yeah.
And yet this is what we are up against.
Yeah, there's always going to be hyperbole in this process. And that's why I'm going to be working hard to get the facts, understand where we can save money and do it efficiently and productively, but also recognize that there will be important needs out there. I mean, one of the issues that I'm concerned about just in the ACA legislation is that there are substantial reductions in public health programming that I know has been beneficial in many parts of the country, including in our area. So I want to make sure that we're taking a balanced approach to these issues, and the president's proposal doesn't deal with the large funding areas in the entitlement spending class. So that's something that we need to look at as well, because we just need to make sure we have a balanced approach in dealing with our budget, and I'm sure most folks would agree with that.
And I also think, Congressman, that a lot of people are going to think that, while cuts are always uncomfortable, isn't it about time that we started right-sizing this federal government? I mean, at some point, the federal government is just involved in too many different things, and we're sort of out of the sweet spot of what the federal government should be doing with regard to certain local programs, right?
Here's you're absolutely right in that regard. And a month ago, we had the Congressional Budget Office gave us projections on the U.S. national debt. We are scheduled right now. We're on a path to go from $19 trillion in national debt to $29 trillion within 10 years.
Oh.
Now, this is largely
repeat that again.
by entitlement spending, mainly Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on the debt. The so-called mandatory budget, which is about 2/3 of the entire federal budget, is on autopilot, and a very much smaller part of it is the so-called discretionary budget, which includes defense. Now, the main national priority, in my mind, of the federal government is the national defense. So we need to make sure, and I think the president is on target, to improve our readiness. And we need to make sure that our friends and adversaries around the world understand that the United States has the capacity to defend our interests and the interests of our allies around the world. And we can't let our guard down in that regard. But I also want to make sure that we're spending the military budget efficiently. There was a a GAO report that came out, I think, in January, which indicated that there's been horrible waste in Pentagon procurement practices. And so there's no area of the federal government where we couldn't economize and save some money.
Well, to your point, and you just talked about the 2/3 of the budget that's on autopilot. What serious efforts are being made to look at that? Because there have been reports out from the Office of Inspector General over the last several years that $60 to $80 billion a year of fraud in those programs that are on autopilot. Is there any serious effort to really go back and examine where those dollars are going?
Well, I think Social Security disability, it has been widely abused. That's one area that has been on very thin ice financially as well, and it's required transfers from the regular Social Security trust fund to support it. But it's also apparent. Just last week, there was another federal indictment of medical providers for fraud in the Medicare program. So it is widely viewed that there's a relatively high, in the neighborhood of 10% or so fraud rate with Medicare. And some of this is just mistakes in terms of billing because the program is so complicated for providers. But in other instances, there is outright fraud going on. So we need to take a sharp examination of all of the expenditures of government. In the food stamp program, we had a hearing in the Agriculture Committee a few weeks ago, and I asked the witnesses who were talking about the nutritional aspects of food stamps whether they thought it was a justified expenditure for folks on food stamps to buy $3 billion worth of soda each year.
And now, the response?
The response was no, that there's no nutritional value whatsoever. But the question always becomes, how do you restrict the purchase the items that can be purchased by someone using their EBT card? And there are technological ways you can do it. Frankly, we should be encouraging people to drink more milk and dairy products. That would help our dairy industry in upstate New York. But at the same time, soda has no nutritional value at all. We spend a total of $6 billion on sweetened drinks, period. $3 billion of
Congressman
that is
Faso,
on soda.
Congressman Faso, we're up against the hard break. Thank you very much. We will talk again very soon on Hudson Valley Focus Live.
Thank you.
John.
Great to be
Take
with
care.
you.